My guest, Sam Temple. Amazing do-it-yourself, like creator. You're on the H3 podcast.
OCD has impacted every aspect of my life because I actually didn't know that I had OCD until I was 21 or 22. I was in talk therapy for so long with talk therapists who were just like, oh, it just sounds like really bad anxiety. I wasn't receiving any specialized care at that point in time.
How did you find the help that you needed?
I saw a psychiatrist for the first time. This was the first and only doctor that had ever told me, like, I don't think it's just anxiety. I think you may actually have OCD. When I got diagnosed, I was in denial for a long time because I was like, I'm not a tidy person. I'm really messy. I don't have OCD. I don't wash my hands all the time. But she referred me out to NOCD, and within my first session, it was like very evident to my therapist. She was like, yes, you have OCD. And I learned so much in my call where I was like, oh, OCD doesn't just look this one way.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. You can check out anything that you need about obsessive compulsive disorder at NOCD.com or treatmyocd.com. And you can also subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast server and check out the NOCD YouTube channel as well. I am so excited today to have my guest, Sam Temple. Hello.
Hello.
You are an amazing do-it-yourself, like creator. You're on the H3 podcast, and there's just so many other cool things that you are getting yourself involved in, because we've had a few chats already that I've gotten to know you, but not everyone has gotten to know you the way, maybe with the OCD things as much. And so this is a fascinating opportunity for us to be together to chat a little bit. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
If OCD was a recipe or a dish, what would it be?
It would have to be like a fucked up ravioli.
A fucked up ravioli. Tell me more.
Because
what
like
is the
from
stuffing
the outside,
of that?
a ravioli looks like normal,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But then on the inside, if it's a fucked up ravioli, that's how I feel, because inside my brain is like, ah. But on the outside, I look very normal and I'm very functioning.
Is that a problem in some ways, even as you look at the history of OCD in your own life?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me more about that.
100%. I mean, OCD has impacted every aspect of my life, from relationships to my focus, my ability to do well in school, my creativity. Just, it's impacted so many aspects of my life because I actually didn't know that I had OCD until I was 21 or 22. I got diagnosed in 2020. So prior to that, I didn't know that I had been experiencing symptoms of OCD my whole life until I was able to look back in retrospect and be like, oh, that was OCD. That was OCD. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was OCD. Yeah.
And I'm going to bet some people just told you were just anxious.
Oh, yeah. Everyone told me I was just anxious because I was in talk therapy for so long with talk therapists who were just like, oh, it just sounds like really bad anxiety. I wasn't receiving any specialized care at that point in time. So.
And it isn't just anxiety, because it can pull on shame and guilt and disgust. Did you have those other kinds of emotional issues that came along with it as well?
Oh, yeah, because of course, I experience really crazy intrusive thoughts. And a lot of times I would get like graphic images in my mind, and I would always feel like guilt because of these like disturbing like graphic images. One I used to get all the time was like an image of like my parents being in danger or crying or in some form of distress, and I didn't know what that meant, but I would just get that image in my mind sometimes, and then I would feel so guilty, like, why am I thinking about this? I don't want to think about this. And the more and more I tried to push it away and tell myself like, oh, this thought's a problem, the more that I would think about it.
And of course, with OCD, it's your fault you're having those thoughts as well, too.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it must be real, and it must be my feelings, right?
Yeah. I've never seen OCD take responsibility for anything at all. It's always going to blame you and throw you under the bus.
Yeah. I've always wondered, why do I not obsess about good things?
Right. Yeah. No one's ever got on a Zoom with me and said, I'm really afraid everyone loves me and thinks I'm awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Never treated that for anybody whatsoever.
I think that's how I sort of originally knew that I had a problem, because I was constantly obsessing over really negative, horrific things. And I feel like that's just generally a red flag. If I'm never thinking about something good, I'm only obsessing over things that are horrific.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you've described, and you've been on Howie's podcast as well too, is health-related anxiety. Mm-hmm. And, that's had a lot of names over the years: hypochondriasis, illness, anxiety disorder, somatic symptom disorder, all these various types of things. But I really interested in people hearing about your fear around your heart rate.
Yeah. So my dad had a heart attack.
Oh. Mm.
Yeah. So okay. I think that I was just kind of predisposed to having this health anxiety surrounding my heart. So I would always just check my pulse over and over. And I would monitor, like, making sure my heart rate's not too high, because in my mind, I was thinking if my heart rate gets too high, I'm going to have a heart attack. And I would always be hyper aware of, like, my diet, like watching cholesterol and, anything that could potentially cause a heart attack or, anything in that ballpark. I was very, very obsessive over.
And how many heart attacks have you had?
I've not had any heart attacks. Knock on, that's not wood, but.
What if we didn't knock on wood? What would happen to us?
Yeah, I would probably have a heart attack.
And great example of what a compulsion even
feels
exactly.
Like.
I've sometimes joked when I do talks, I say, I've got a product coming out next week. It'll be $19.99. It's called Block of Wood. You just carry it around with you. When you need it, you take it out, you knock on it, no problem. Everything will be fine in your life. All will be good.
And I would probably buy it.
Yeah. There is a relationship of that superstitiousness and feel and OCD. How has that been a part of your life?
So with superstition, I've talked about it before, but seeing, like, things that are certain, it's kind of like the stepping on the crack, you'll break your grandma's back type thing. So I, like, with noticing car colors, like, if the next car that drives by is red, my mom's going to die. If this happens, if a plane flies over my head right now, I'm going to die today. And it would I would constantly try to make sense of the uncertainty that I was so scared of by finding, like, tangible things just in nature.
Yeah.
And that's illogical. There's no reason, but that's something that's really difficult for people to understand about OCD, is that even though these things are illogical, I know that there's nothing backing up these thoughts, but it doesn't take them away. Yeah. It doesn't make them less distressing.
Yeah, and that's probably the hardest thing for people, because I'm assuming people have said things to you like, just stop thinking about it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I should have tried that.
Yeah. Why don't you give it a try now?
Never
just
tried
see
it.
how it goes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's such the lack of understanding of what OCD truly is that it's not a logical problem, it's an emotional problem.
Yeah.
Right?
And I totally, like, when I got diagnosed, I was in denial for a long time, because I was like, I'm not a tidy person. I'm really messy. I don't have OCD. I don't wash my hands all the time. And it just goes to show how only kind of one or two forms of OCD are so normalized, I guess. But then it's so much deeper than that.
You've done so much, your do-it-yourself stuff, the podcast, the work you've done. And I'm going to bet someone, even if they haven't said this to you, might have thought her OCD must have really helped her be able to accomplish so much. And I'm thinking you might disagree with that statement.
Yeah, that's something that I used to deal with when I was younger, when I would be having these thoughts, and I didn't really know they were intrusive thoughts at the time, but I would tell my mom or tell whoever, I'm really struggling, I'm really anxious about this one hypothetical situation. And people would be like, oh, you're just so creative. Oh, you just have such a big imagination. Oh, your mind is just running wild with all these ideas. And it's like, don't tell me that this is what being creative is. This is not being creative. This is disordered thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've kind of had to learn over time, looking back, like, over my life.
How suggestible do you feel you have been to these types of intrusive thoughts? Sometimes, and I'm do this example right now, but sometimes I will, when I'm doing a talk for people who don't understand OCD, I'll start talking about lice and how they get in your hair and they crawl on you. And suddenly everyone in the audience starts doing this, and you could just see them start to do it. And I say, if I can get you to scratch your head within 1 minute of talking about lice, multiply that by 1,000,000 and that's where OCD takes it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great analogy. I have sort of similar thing. I have this one thing where I will convince myself that I can't feel the top of my head, which is like really weird. But then, so I do like certain like muscle motions in my face until it feels right, until I can like feel this area of my head.
Okay.
And it's really weird because most people don't really think about the top of their head.
I didn't until right now, but
I know. And now you're thinking about the top of your head, right?
About it, yes.
I used to have, when I was younger, I would be like, oh my God, I have fingers and they're attached to my hands. And then I would just like constantly be like, oh my God, how do I get my fingers off? I don't want to have fingers. I can't stop thinking about my fingers. And yeah, so it's just like weird. I don't know. Once you start thinking about something.
Yeah. And it's hard to be a DIY person without fingers, probably.
I know. Yeah. And I think it's because I used to have a fear when I was in college. I was doing art classes, and I was like, oh my God, it would suck if I didn't have hands. I wouldn't get to do anything I love if I didn't have hands.
Yeah.
And then I just think about like, oh my gosh, what if something happens to my hands? That's why like when I'm working or doing anything, I always wear gloves because I'm so terrified of something like happening to my hands.
Yeah. And then we see inspirational people out there who don't have hands, who don't have arms, who don't have legs, who are doing so many things, right? And so you can have an example of people can still do amazing things, even if they don't have that stuff. But OCD
just doesn't
says,
matter.
Yeah, fine for them, not for you, though, right?
Yeah. No, it's just like there's no reasoning with it at all.
Yeah. When people would come up to you and try to reason you through things, I'm assuming more frustrating than anything else.
It is frustrating, but it got to a point where I was just like, these people don't understand, and that's fine. They're trying to help me in the way that they think they can help me, but it's not helping. So I would just kind of smile and nod like, oh yeah, don't think about it. Yeah, you're so right. I should just stop.
To your level of comfort, how did you find the help that you needed then?
So I saw a psychiatrist for the first time. I had never been to a psychiatrist before in 2020. And I just sort of explained what was going on. And this was the first and only doctor that had ever told me, like, I don't think it's just anxiety. I think you may actually have OCD. And at that point, that's when I was like, nah, I don't think I have that. But she referred me out to NOCD. And within my first session, it was like very evident to my therapist. She was like, yes, you have OCD, because I was explaining so much and I learned so much in my call where I was like, oh, OCD doesn't just look this one way. It can be a lot of things. And I've seen it in my relationships. I've seen it in like the way that I eat, my relationship with food. It's just like over time, I was like, oh, wow, this has really impacted me throughout my whole entire life.
And in terms of treatment, we also know this, that it will continue to impact you. I mean, we're not here to say you're cured by any means, but you've learned to live with OCD, right?
Sure. The way that I like to phrase it is it's like that no matter how much therapy I do, that version of myself is inside me, but I now love that person instead of hate that person. It's just I've changed the relationship with that version of myself.
And that version of yourself is no longer in charge.
Right. They're in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
I'm in the driver's seat now.
Though they're probably an annoying passenger once.
Yes. They're a backseat driver.
Yeah. They don't go away or anything.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to start to take over instead of having the OCD being the driver?
Oh, yeah.
And how was that for you?
I mean, when I started ERP, it's a modality that I'd never experienced before because I was with talk therapists that don't specialize in OCD. So when I started ERP, it's kind of, it feels weird at the beginning, at least for me it did, because usually in traditional talk therapy, it's kind of, you don't realize that you're reassurance seeking most of the time.
Yeah.
But then with ERP, it's like, oh, I have to like hardcore confront these things over and over until I am like desensitized from this thought. And this thought now causes me less distress. So it's difficult at the beginning because you're just not used to having to do that.
So you had to do that with your heart rate then?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I started exercising and I started like low. It would be like 5 minutes on the treadmill on like 2 speed, 0 incline. And so I did that for a while, and I gradually worked up to, I did yoga, which is a little less like strenuous. And then trying to get into cardio, I ended up hiring a trainer because I was like, I need an accountability partner. I need someone to make sure that I show up. And part of it was like, if I start having a heart attack, maybe they can call an ambulance for me. That's like what I was thinking.
Sure.
But I kind of dismissed that because it got me to the gym, and it got me to get into working out and retraining my body to know that like your heart is a muscle that works when it needs to work. It needs to work right now, and you're safe. You're fine. So that was huge, and sort of just, it was a big exposure. Just retraining my body.
I've talked about the heart being like a race car engine. It can do a few just practice laps around, and then you can just gun it and go.
Yeah.
And then you could get a yellow flag, and I got to slam on the brakes, and then you got to crawl, and then you could go again and everything. And that's not what's going to just kill people. Is that.
Yeah.
But what if, right?
Yeah.
And I'd love to ask you about what is your relationship with those two words? What if?
What if?
Yeah.
My brain loves what if. It what ifs me all day. But I'm definitely, I'm trying to, even though I am an ERP and it's extremely helpful, I do still struggle with those thoughts. And so what if I'm able to turn the dial down on those to where they're not as loud, but I definitely do still struggle with those what ifs.
And with OCD's nickname being the doubting disorder, and it's going to demand from you, and you talked about uncertainty a little bit ago, so I'm so glad you went there. OCD is going to demand from you an absolute answer, but it's never going to believe any answer you give it at the same time.
Right.
How stuck were you in trying to satisfy OCD and only to be rejected that you'd never done it?
It ruled my life. It was every day, all day, every day. It made me so avoidant. It made me not want to leave the house. It made me not want to go see friends. Like I completely abandoned like everything I like to do because my mind was like, you need to sit and focus on this right now.
Yeah.
This is all that you can focus on. But I got to a point in therapy where I just told myself, I was like, in life, there's a chance of everything. And if I live my life afraid of chance every day, then I don't live.
Yeah.
Like I'm not, I can never reason with that.
There's potentially someone out there right now watching this who thinks, yeah, well, she has something different than I have. And I'm wondering, did that kind of thought go through
Oh yeah.
your head
Yeah,
as well,
because
too?
like I said, I had been misdiagnosed for my whole entire life. And so I was like, oh, well, if I just have severe anxiety, I have the worst, untreatable, most horrible case of anxiety that there is. Because even my talk therapist can't help me. My general practitioner can't help me. It was just over and over. Just being told anxiety is very isolating.
You finally find an evidence-based treatment, exposure and response prevention therapy. And I'm betting, because I've done it enough to introduce it to people, I'm betting that the first introduction is, you want me to do what?
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And I was so, when I found NOCD, it was honestly the first time that I had felt hope in years, because I was like, oh, finally there's someone specialized in this, because I had never seen anyone specialized in this before. And it was so refreshing, because I also, like we mentioned on Howie's show, that it's so convenient. It's flexible. I can see my therapist when I want to. It doesn't take away from anything that I love to do. It fits in with my schedule. And that was something that was so important to me, because being creative is my outlet.
Yeah. OCD doesn't usually travel by itself. It brings some of its really crappy friends along with it, like depression and other anxiety disorders and things. Other things in your life too that ERP's been applicable to you for and helped you with? Or?
Yes, definitely depression, because OCD was making me extremely depressed. I struggled a lot with existential OCD and thoughts of, It's stuff that I could never tell a talk therapist because they would have been like, 5150. But things like, oh, I hope I don't take my own life.
Sure.
I would think about that constantly. I would think about it all day, every day. And it got to a point where I was like, what if I do want to do that?
Yeah.
What if that's real? And then it's just like that's like one of my level 9s.
Sure.
Like it was extremely difficult to confront that, but working through ERP, the volume is so low on that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm free from this like horrific thinking about myself.
Yeah.
So yes, like depression, like that thought was very depressing for me. And it made me spiral like several times. And something else that ERP has given me is a way better focus.
Okay.
I struggled tremendously with focusing. I couldn't sit down and like watch a show or focus on one project. I would always have to be just like bouncing around, just like keeping my mind busy to prevent a thought from occurring is kind of what was going on. But I'm sort of in a place where I'm very anti-distraction now. I don't like saying distraction.
Yeah.
I think what's more powerful than distraction is being okay with the moment that you're in.
Yeah.
And it's easy to distract yourself. It's hard to be comfortable with right now.
Right. And sometimes people make a mistake. They think if I go out and have an OCD thought or image or urge, and then I go do something, is that distracting? Well, if you're living your life, it's not distracting. That's living your life with OCD,
right?
Versus, oh, I'm having this, I need to distract from it purposely and do nothing else, but really focus on anything but that.
Yeah. For that reason, I've tried to like limit, I just call it like doom scrolling, like not getting on TikTok and just, that is distraction. I don't want to do that. I want to go do something like constructive. So I'll go pick up one of my projects that I'm working on, or I'll do something that I'm going to be happy about the next day, like building towards a goal. I always just, in my mind, I always say, does this set you up to be happier tomorrow? Or are you just distracting yourself right now?
Yeah.
So I always try to know the difference.
And I like that you're thinking about tomorrow too, because OCD is only looking at doom for tomorrow.
Yeah. It wants to take tomorrow away from you.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. And OCD also, it's hard to stay focused on the moment, right? Because you're worried about how things are going to come back to haunt you, or how you might do something terrible or anything like that.
Right.
So it pretty much screws with everything, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I used to always say, I don't say it so much anymore because I feel like I'm getting to the other side of ERP, but I used to always use the term cautiously optimistic. I would always say, cautiously optimistic because I'm feeling really good right now, but tomorrow I'm going to feel really bad. Or what if I feel really bad tomorrow? But I'm trying to take the cautiously out of it.
With that, when you start to see improvements in your life, there's sometimes the back end spike of OCD, right? Now that you don't care about your heart rate so much, it must mean you do want to have a heart attack or something like that. I mean,
love heart attacks now.
Yeah.
I love panic attacks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How is it to accept that OCD will always be there, but you don't have to always listen to it?
I think it's just reestablishing that trust in my own body and mind gives me so much reassurance, which, with OCD, we don't necessarily want, but in that way we do. I'm just learning. I'm just learning tools. I'm absorbing tools. And I know that I can trust them because I'm here and they work, So just practicing over and over. I think I will always be doing some of my exposures. But
hopefully.
But it just works. It just works, and I trust it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody gets through a very difficult situation in life without still having to do something about it. If you have a heart attack, you're going to do cardiac rehab, and it's still good to have a good diet and go for a walk, even 10 years after or something like that, right?
Yeah.
To just put it into perspective that this is now a part of my life and the way that I face things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to bring it down too. You've done very successful things, right? And I wonder the things that you do, all of the stuff with the podcast and the do-it-yourself things, Could you have seen yourself doing those in the throes of OCD?
No, I wasn't.
That's what I think would be really inspiring for people to know about. Like when you were in the midst of all of that, what was your outlook versus how has it changed?
So being in the midst of like creative projects, I think that at that point in time, I was using those things as a distraction.
Okay.
But the difference now is that I know that I'm just doing this because I love to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it because I just like need to distract myself right now. But my outlook when I was doing those things was like, I have to, it almost felt like creativity as a compulsion. It was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go work on something. I'm going to go to the gym. Like going to the gym became a compulsion. So I kept telling myself like, oh, I have to do this project. If I finish this project, I'm going to feel better. If I do this, I'm going to feel better. So the difference now is that I'm just not thinking that way. My whole attitude around my creativity and my work is different, and it's no longer a distraction or a compulsion.
And when OCD, because it will still try to raise its ugly head into the midst of all of this, does that, how do you reply now?
I'm much better at sort of stopping and taking a breath and realizing when I'm ruminating and trying to not feed into it, which it has taken so much practice. It is so difficult to not listen to your own head when it's your own head.
Yeah, because we're kind of trained that if we think
it's kind of like
it's true,
attached
right?
to my body, so I have to like listen to it.
We do bring our brain everywhere we go.
I know. Trust me, I have tried to leave it at home. It just doesn't.
You stay here.
It's so hard.
I'm going there. Yeah. Just this notion that you now live a life with obsessive compulsive disorder,
right?
Instead of a life driven by obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah. And I think that for me, it's taken a long time for me to accept that, but I feel good knowing that I'm doing my part in taking away that stigma, because I was so like ashamed and embarrassed, and I felt like no one understood. But I think just destigmatizing it is such a key, and I was just inspired to talk about it. So
yeah, and people probably reach out to you or ask questions. How do you inspire others that way as well too? Because obviously you have the things that are out on social media that can be very inspiring, but you'll have the personal side of it as well too. How do you approach it?
I have a lot of people that message me and ask for advice, and I love to give people advice about OCD, because I felt so isolated for so long, because I never heard anyone talk about what I was feeling. And it was actually not until I heard Luke Combs talk about it on Joe Rogan, but I was so inspired by him because he's one of my idols, and it was just hearing someone describe exactly what I was going through. I was like, if this person can impact me so much to get help, I can impact so many people too, if I can just talk about this.
And that's got to be so gratifying, I would think. I mean, I get that as a therapist, knowing that I've had a chance to help coach people through a lot of the OCD and to get their lives to a point they're living their life and not OCD's life. But I'm sure you feel very similar types of things as well too.
Oh, of course. Yeah. It's an honor that people can come to me and ask me these questions. I'm like, wow, you trust me to give you advice. Like, that's really cool. And there was a point in time where people were asking me questions where I didn't feel qualified to answer. And I was like, I don't know. I didn't feel like I was good enough to answer. And I think now I'm at a point where I feel like I'm qualified. This is my life. Of course I have experience here.
Sure.
I'm more than qualified to talk about this. So there is like an element of imposter syndrome there that I had to combat.
There's people out there right now who aren't getting evidence-based treatment for OCD. And what would you say to them about what you think the difference is between a very generalized treatment versus a specialized treatment?
I think that the difference there, as I mentioned before, is it's important to understand that you're not necessarily going to get better with OCD by going to therapy and seeking reassurance all the time. You need specialized therapy. I was in talk therapy for so much of my life, wondering, why am I not getting better? Why am I not getting better? Nothing is happening here. And with ERP, you have to confront these things, and you have to take the fear out of these thoughts and ideas and images in order to be successful and retrain your brain that, hey, these things are not a threat. You also don't have to believe these things. So getting specialized treatment was like paramount in my recovery. Like NOCD was the first time that I had had any hope with this.
And getting that treatment not only affects your life, but you have family and relationships and friends. How has it impacted the broader part of your life beyond just what you deal with internally?
Yeah, my family and my friends and my partner are all extremely patient with me. And I'm just so grateful, because I think back about some situations where I was like, my friends could have just ditched me there. My partner could have broken up with me in this situation. My family could have gotten so mad at me. Mm-hmm. And I just look back with so much gratitude that I have a great support system and patient people around me. And I know that not everyone is that fortunate to have those situations.
Sometimes people have to walk on eggshells around folks with OCD because they don't want to offend. They don't. A lot of people
just don't understand that, like, I'm having a bad day right now.
Yeah.
Because I keep telling myself that every time I cut up a cucumber, I'm going to stab myself.
Yeah.
People don't understand how that keeps me in the house all day. Mm-hmm. Like, there's just, people just don't get that. Like, this can be it can make you so avoidant, and it's so isolating because it sounds crazy because there's no logic.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen people who don't want to leave the house because they're stuck at the door checking themselves for knives to make sure they don't have a knife on them.
Oh, wow.
And they'll even strip down totally naked and check their body still and try to feel every part of it just to make sure there's not a knife hidden somewhere even on them. And then they have to check their clothes and their pockets and shake them out and all sorts of things. Run a metal detector over them to make sure there's not something there. Like, there's never enough you can do for OCD.
For a while I couldn't even cook because I was like, if I have to prep something, if I have to cut something up, I am going to stab myself. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, oh my God, what if I want to stab myself? Oh my gosh, I'm going to stab myself. Mm-hmm. And so it was just that thinking over and over for the longest time. I'm just now really hitting it hard with my DIY content because I was afraid to use power tools.
Sure.
For the longest time, I had this like intrusive thoughts about like nail guns and staple guns. And what if I just hit myself in the head with a hammer? Mm-hmm. It's like, these things are not going to happen. They don't align with my values. They're ego dystonic. They're not what I want.
Yeah.
And it was just, what if I do that?
And then part of therapy is, okay, I accept the fact that I could do that.
I can do anything.
Yeah. I could chop my hand off with a power tool today. Yeah. It's a possibility.
Don't want to.
Don't want to. Not going to try to.
Yeah.
But it is possible. I mean, I tell people after I'm done with a day's work, I work in my basement, I go upstairs, I have no guarantee I'm going to make it to the top of the stairs safely. Mm-hmm. Right? I could fall backwards, crack my head open, die of a seizure or something like that. And it's not till a day or two later that they find me. Yeah. And it's bloody and smelly, right?
That would suck.
Yeah, it would suck, but it could happen. And I live with that. I accept that.
Yeah.
And I've always found it interesting with OCD that it says, okay, I accept that for all of this, except for this thing.
Yeah.
And this thing I can't accept it for, mm-hmm. right? And I don't know that there's always a rhyme or reason why OCD has decided this thing is now the worst thing in the world. This thing is so terrible.
It cycles. I would have like a few months, this one thing really bothers me.
Okay.
For a few months, this thing really, really bothers me. After my heart rate situation, like originally, I had this thing where I felt like I couldn't feel my shoulder. And so I would constantly like move my shoulder, like constantly. I just couldn't. It was like restless shoulder syndrome. Is that real?
Well,
I invented
for
it.
today. Yeah.
Yeah.
New
So-
diagnosis, everyone. Restless
Yeah.
shoulder
Google
syndrome.
it.
Yeah.
Google it 20 times.
Restless leg, be jealous, because now we have restless shoulder.
Yeah. So like that was something that I went through, but I was always so fascinated by how my OCD would just cycle. It would be, okay, we received enough reassurance for this thing, but what about brain tumors?
Yeah.
So it would be a different situation.
And not only cycle, but sometimes just the ridiculous nature of some of the things, right?
Yeah. Like a collapsed lung. That was a thing that I had for so long. And I'm like, I'm breathing. I'm good. I didn't have any like traumatic injury. I think I was just scared that my lung would just collapse. And it's just, I know it's ridiculous. Even like saying it sounds like so crazy. And with the heart attacks also, I would be worrying about having a heart attack when I was like 18. And I always felt so bad telling my dad, like, I'm so scared I'm going to have a heart attack. And like he's someone who had a heart attack, he's like, he's like, you're fine. You're 18 years old. You have perfect cholesterol. So it would just be like, it just sounds so crazy sometimes.
And you could hear that, get relief for a moment, and then it started all over again. I bet, right?
It's just reassurance. Reassurance lasts for like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And then it just starts over again.
And you build a tolerance to it over time.
Yeah.
You need more and more.
It's like a drug.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
I say that all the time.
Yeah.
Reassurance is like a drug. You need more and more of it all the time.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to bet you found times there was just never going to be enough reassurance. No one could give you what you wanted.
Yeah. And especially that's a thing with like existential OCD.
Sure.
You will never have answers.
Yes.
You will never have answers. But I feel like that's why existential OCD is just like so insidious and it's so sticky, because it's like you can never satisfy those questions, you know? And it's like, oh, well then great. My OCD will always have something to attach to.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always loved that. They've debated these questions for 3,000 years, but you, Sam, must solve them. Yes. You are the one to solve
I will solve this for all of us. Just let me Google it.
And then you will be the author of the greatest philosophy book ever used.
I'm
as
going
a college
to invent
textbook.
the serum. We're going to live forever.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where I think at some point, some people with OCD do almost get convinced that, maybe I could do that, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it starts to get into I would have, I don't know, maybe this is also a factor of existential OCD, but I would be like, it's my purpose to do this thing. And I would start to get very like philosophical. I'd be like, I don't have OCD. I have like this like intuition. What if I have this like insane intuition where like I'm supposed to do this? And like, I don't know what that is, but I would get that too.
Yeah, there are no bounds where OCD will go to. There's zero limits. And I think that's the other thing that surprises folks, because sometimes they'll say, why does it have to go there?
Yeah.
Right? Why that one? And I always say, well, because it's going to pick on what's important to you.
Yeah, well, that was something that gave me so much hope and comfort when I first started ERP, was that OCD is treated, like all subtypes of OCD are treated the same way.
Right.
You know, so like, but it was very encouraging that it's all treated with ERP. And when I was making my list, making my hierarchy, I was like, oh, it's very interesting that all of these, that this modality works on every single one of these things, from being obsessed with how many calories I eat to what is my purpose in life. It's like it all can be treated the same way.
Yeah. And I love what you said about talked out of it. You know, I always let everyone know, I'm never going to talk you out of OCD, but I can really try to behave you out of it.
That's good.
That's really the goal, right?
Yeah.
If you could change your behavior, that has a far bigger influence on your thoughts than just trying to change your thoughts. If you have a favorite team in any kind of sport whatsoever, could I talk you out of it? Or if you have a favorite band, could I talk you out of your favorite band and say, here's why you should like this band better? And would you ever go, oh, okay, well, sure. Yeah, I'll just forget that band because you're right. I should like this band better. And if I can't talk you out of a favorite team or a favorite band, how am I going to talk you out of OCD?
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think I'm a pretty good therapist, but I'm not that good. And I don't know anybody that could just do it that way, that it's that behavioral change. So you had to apply the behavior changes to your life.
Oh yeah.
And how did it feel to start that whole process, to actually change your behavior?
I mean, it's like adjusting to a new normal.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I need to, like with my checking, delaying compulsions is very hard. So that was something that I started with, was just kind of being like, all right, I'm really feeling the urge to check my pulse right now. And sometimes I would like sit on my hands so that I wouldn't do it. But then it's like, I would feel my heartbeat in my fingers and I'd be like, okay, like I can't escape this. Let me just do this. It's easier. So, trying to just delay and eventually stop doing those compulsions was one huge thing. And then just getting in the habit of doing my ERP also, just making sure that I am doing my homework and repeating these things and noticing how I feel and if I'm combating them, if I'm ruminating. Noticing my cognitive distortions is also like a very important thing for me. It's difficult to get to a place where you can just catch it and then correct it.
And it takes practice.
Lots of practice.
Yeah.
ERP is practice.
It takes one time to learn to be afraid of something. It takes multiple times to learn to feel
That's
safe
so true
about something. Right?
Yeah.
You get stuck on one elevator and you will be afraid of all elevators for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah. I still don't do elevators. Working on it.
Well, I know what we're doing right after this podcast. We'll go find us an elevator.
This is not. No, we're not doing exposures right now.
Right,
This is not a therapeutic hour.
Wait, I'm not charging you for that? What? All right, never. But to learn to feel safe, I could work with you on an elevator, and then eventually you would say, okay, I'm good with this elevator, but all the other ones are still bad, right?
Right.
So one fear generalizes everywhere. One safety stays with one safety.
Yeah.
You really do have to practice and get out there. And I think that can sometimes be the frustrating piece for people where they're like, why am I just not feeling better? Because it's even hardwired in our brain. It takes longer to learn to be safe.
Right. Something else that also helps me is just, I've become fascinated with like probability. So I was really afraid to fly for a long time. And my most recent trip, I was flying from Atlanta to LA, and my plane experienced an aborted takeoff, which is when you think you're taking off and then they slam on the brakes. And it ended up being due to an engine problem.
Okay.
Some alert went off and the plane just came to a screeching halt. Before ERP, I would have opened the plane door myself and gotten off.
Yeah.
But I freaked out a little bit. My heart rate did rise, and I just I was like, yeah, this is scary. That's fine, but we're on the ground. We're not in the air. There's no way that the pilot is going to let this plane take off without some sort of an explanation of what just happened. And then I was like, and you know what? This will probably never happen to me again.
Probably not.
Because
but it could.
Who experiences that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, people do, but I was like, how many times in your life are you going to experience an aborted takeoff? And that was actually, the pilots ended up telling us that was the first time in their whole career that they had experienced that. And I was like, don't want to hear that, but okay.
I had thought for a little while about doing some work with fear of flying, and I have a friend who's a pilot and a pilot instructor, and I went up with him during a flight lesson once, and it just happened to be the lesson where they were stalling the plane so that the plane would die, and then we would go into a dive and they had to restart. We did that 9 times, and I was like, oh my God. But again, you know what? You practice for things like that.
Right.
And just like you practice with ERP, right? You practice and you get to a point where even something like that, okay.
Yeah.
All right, the plane stalled. We just do this, and then we get it going, and then we're back and we're doing it again.
Yeah, my mom would always comment when I was a kid, I would always have horrible anxiety about hypothetical situations, but then when something actually wrong was happening, she'd be like, you're so chill now. And I'm like, yeah, I've been rehearsing for this my whole life. Because I'm always like preparing for the worst thing ever to happen.
The what if is worse than the event.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And I like how you talked about probability too. I always say, in OCD, possibility equals probability.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as it's possible, it's probable.
Yeah, but then you just live life in fear of chance all the
100%.
time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And now hopefully you're living life knowing that, hey, something could happen.
Yeah.
And I can handle it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What's your advice then? You know, we talked a little bit about people will come up to you, but what is your advice, your kind of go-to for people who have OCD, or if someone was here asking, hey, Sam, what should I do? What do you want to tell them?
So my thing, I cannot stress enough how much I thought I was beyond help. I thought I was beyond repair. I thought I was too far gone. That feeling was so strong. I was so sure of it, and I just wanted to give up. NOCD has changed my life. The first time I ever talked about NOCD, I was not even sponsored. So it's just, I believe in this so much. It has truly, truly changed my life, and it can change yours. I strongly suggest starting that 15-minute call.
Awesome. Well, 100%. Sam, thank you for being here so very much. We really appreciate it. And your story is very inspiring to people to know that there is life with OCD, and it doesn't have to be in the driver's seat.
We don't fight now. We hold hands.
There you go.
Yeah.
Crappy relationship still, but
yeah. It's complicated.
It's complicated. We'll go with that. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us today on the Get to Know OCD podcast. And thank you, Sam Temple, for being here with us today. Really appreciate it. If you're looking for more information about OCD or related conditions, check us out at NOCD.com or treatmyocd.com. If you liked what we were talking about today, subscribe to the Get to Know OCD podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts from. And also check out the NOCD YouTube channel as well. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.